morning, everyone, and welcome back to Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. It's Tuesday, which means we're going to break down the waiver wire. There's been a couple trades today as well, as the trade deadline is today, as well as another big thing that we'll not be talking about this morning. So we'll go ahead and take out our coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Right, welcome in, everyone. Good to see you all. Koa, Ty, Mark, Bach, Donald, Fantasy, Condo, Terminal, Sarcasm, Lucas, and of course our fearless producer Dustin doing a fantastic job as always. So, as mentioned, today is the trade deadline. Teams are going to be making some moves, doing some things, getting some players, losing some players. You know the deal. We've already had 2 this morning that pertain to our fantasy football team. There have been 3 trades in general. Zadarius Smith has been traded to the Lions. We don't necessarily care about that unless you're in IDP leagues. I mean, I'm sure that he's a fun little D lineman now in Sleeper with the dual eligibility. But we have 2 that actually happen that affect our fantasy teams. One going to be Jonathan Mingo going to the Cowboys. That does, of course, affect Ryan Flournoy immensely. Very frustrated about that, to be honest. But we'll see. It could be a nice little test. We'll see. But Jonathan Mingo, we like. The second-round draft capital. He has the good athleticism. He just hasn't really put it together on the football field. Could be fine in Dallas. I wouldn't be surprised if he's, better than Jalen Tolbert, if you're like in a vacuum. Now, that's not how it's really going to be this year, but in general, I could see Jonathan Mingo kind of earning a decent spot on this depth chart. If he ever does tap into his athleticism, that's kind of the thing, is he hasn't yet. So there's still a world where, nothing even really happens as a result of this. But definitely worth, I would say, if Jonathan Mingo is available on your wire in a deeper league, and you need a wide receiver help, or you've just kind of got the room, then I would add him. Standard league, we're leaving him. I mean, I'm not even really worried about adding Jalen Tolbert, to be honest, if he's available. Like, none of these Cowboys players really going forward are going to be too exciting. Dak Prescott is expected to land on IR. And yes, CeeDee Lamb is expected to miss some time as well. But, I mean, we're talking about Cooper Rush targets with no real excitement on the offense. It's not like there's a lot of ceiling in these players anyway. But definitely worth rostering if you need them in deeper leagues. But the big one that I'm actually kind of excited about is Khalil Herbert being traded to the Bengals. Khalil Herbert kind of got buried on the Bears depth chart. And that, to me, was less of a talent issue and more of just a coaching staff issue. A lot of times running backs come in from a previous regime and then just kind of get stuck there. And unfortunately for Herbert, they brought in DeAndre Swift. Roschon Johnson is really good and just one of those players that coaches really like. So he just didn't really get to get much action, but we've seen some good games from Khalil Herbert when he's out there. He's a very, very good running back, like he grinding between the tackles, finding the holes, breaking tackles. He's pretty explosive as well. We've seen some really good performances from him. So I actually like him a lot in Cincinnati. With Zach Moss, it was reported yesterday that he is out indefinitely with a neck injury. So this is a 1-for-1 replacement. In fact, Khalil Herbert's better than Zach Moss. He is more athletic than Zach Moss. So I honestly wouldn't be surprised. I mean, not anytime soon, but I mean, Khalil Herbert's going to get a decent amount of opportunity on this offense. It's probably going to take a week or 2 for him to get, acclimated and then to take snaps away from Chase Brown, who's playing really well. But he's going to get some stuff. He's going to get a few carries a game, probably some goal line carries here or there. And he's good. We do like Khalil Herbert. He was just kind of in an unfortunate situation in Chicago. So definitely worth adding as well. As this is the waiver wire show, definitely worth adding Khalil Herbert. He's not in the actual list I put together since this happened before I went live, but definitely want to add Khalil Herbert. If he's available, he's a handcuff plus probably. I think he'll actually get some volume behind Chase Brown. But if anything happens to Chase Brown, then he has a massive contingent upside as well as the main running back in Cincinnati. So Khalil Herbert, he's a big add. I'm not going to lie. I like that move a lot for Cincinnati. Someone was going to get him. A lot of people expected him to go to Dallas, but I like the landing spot in Cincinnati. I think it's a good one for him, and I think it's a good one for the team as well. I did put together a few players that I'm keeping an eye on. I didn't think too hard about it. Last year, we did a whole episode on the trade deadline, And I don't think a single one of the players we discussed ended up being traded. So it was kind of a waste of an episode. And that's kind of how it goes. It's always just some random ass players that get traded. But there are a few players that I thought of this morning that I was like, I'll at least keep an eye on them today and we'll see what happens. I'm not sure if there's anything behind it at all, but Mike Williams, of course, in New York, with the way things are going there, with them getting Devontae Adams, there's just no room for Mike Williams. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe even just sent him away in like a pick swap or something to some random team out there. So that's someone I'm keeping an eye on. Maybe I wouldn't say add, since waivers will process after the trade deadline, but that last week we talked about it, right? We said if Mike Williams is available, add him in case he's traded. That's someone I'm keeping an eye on. Cortland Sutton as well. This is unlikely, Cortland Sutton, but still the Broncos are definitely in a little bit of a rebuild stage, even if things are trending in the right direction. I would be curious if they got enough return for Cortland Sutton, if they would probably move on from him. I doubt they get a good enough return, but someone to keep an eye on. And Michael Mayer, he's just kind of been on the NFI, sitting out really for the most part from what it seems. It seems that it's more of a mental issue than an actual health issue. And part of that, I think just means that he needs a change of scenery. I think he was a little bit bummed by the Brock Bowers draft pick, and that's kind of affected him. Now, of course, these superstar athletes shouldn't really be affected by those types of things, but some people are. And I wouldn't be surprised if a change of scenery is all Michael Mayer needs. So that's another name I'm watching at the trade deadline, as that's a young, talented tight end that if he goes to the right place, it could be kind of special. So that's kind of all the news so far. My bird is being really annoying right now for some reason, so I'm going to kick him out. While that happens, I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit of an ad break. Why don't we hear about FastDraft, as something is in the works?
Drafting is the best part of fantasy football, and drafting fast is what FastDraft is all about. FastDraft is the fastest best ball app on the planet. With just 6 rounds and a 20-second time clock, you can draft in under 10 minutes. Don't have 10 minutes? Use turbo mode to create teams with a click of a button. We love volume players, and volume players love FastDraft because we make it exponentially easier to max enter 150 lineups, and if a tournament you love does fill, don't worry, we'll roll out another one the next day because we focus just on the players you care about. In April and May, our Origins tournaments are rookie only because the NFL Draft is the second most popular event in American sports after the Super Bowl. FastDraft tracks player ownership in real time, so you can always see your exposure at a glance in the draft room, and there's no position restrictions. And the best part of that is you never have to draft a tight end. With only 60 players drafted, there are 2 key ways to get unique. You draft players well above or below ADP, or shake up your boosters. The boosters let you set 4 players with point multipliers up to 2x, so you can improve your chances of being unique by putting premiums on later round picks. Okay, that's what FastDraft's all about. Now start your engines.
If you guys did some fast drafting, just know that you can go onto the FastDraft app, check the live results, and you can actually see how your team is doing in all the tournaments. You can see the top teams as well. Pretty fun stuff. And supposedly there's some big stuff in the works over by that team right now that hopefully we have an announcement on soon. But check out FastDraft, guys, if you haven't yet. It is changing the game of best ball. Now, we have some waiver wire advice. If you're here instead of Theo, thank you so much. But if you want to check out Theo's waiver wire as well, he does a great job getting all the players that should be available on the waiver wire. I like to talk about the players I would pick up. That's kind of how I look at this thing. There's a ton of players that you can pick up on the waiver wire every week, but which ones are actually worth adding, right? Like, do we really care about some of these wide receivers, right? Like, they're just going to sit on my bench and I'm never really going to feel comfortable starting them. So I like to focus on players that I see some contingent upside in, and that I just think hold some sort of value even if they are on the bench, right? Because there's a lot of players. We'll talk about it later after we go through my list of players that are going to be recommended by a lot of by a lot of analysts out there that I just don't care about. So make sure you stick around to that. But for now, I've got 16 players that I'm actually looking at on the waiver wire this week, available in 75% or more of Yahoo leagues. We use Yahoo to cover some of the more shallow leagues, and then we work our way down. So we're going to start with the least available and go to the most available. And believe it or not, guys, Demario Douglas Demario Douglas has found himself available in 78% of leagues after being kind of disappointing the last couple weeks. He had been dropped in a lot of leagues, has not been on this waiver wire show because he's been rostered in a ton of leagues. But over the last couple weeks, being disappointing, only 2 receptions and 12 yards the last 2 weeks, just not doing a lot. He ended up being dropped in a lot of leagues. And of course, what's he do? He gets 9 targets, right? He still shows that he is the wide receiver 1 in New England. He needs to be rostered. There was no reason to drop him. Yeah, it's frustrating, but Drake May is playing really well. And he's the wide receiver 1. So if Demario Douglas was dropped in your league, definitely pick him back up. And same with Ray Davis. We literally last week only threw him in because he was like 26% rostered. And I was like, well, he's close enough. I still want to talk about him because he should not be dropped. And well, he got dropped in a lot of leagues. What's he do? 16 fantasy points. Whoa, my coffee is coming back. Anyway, Ray Davis, again, he's never really going to be reliable as a starter unless James Cook is out. But we're still seeing him put up points, in a limited workload role. He's a very good running back. And it's going to get to the point where him and James Cook are sharing the workload. Now, of course, you mostly want Ray Davis in Dynasty, but still, running backs are so important to throw on your bench. We don't care about these wide receivers. For the most part, we don't care about tight ends and random quarterbacks and stuff like that. Like, as you'll find, this show is almost all running backs all the time because injuries generally fall their way, and if that happens, they produce. Whereas generally, if an injury falls a wide receiver's way, it's not like they turn into Mike Evans, right? Like, it's not like Trey Palmer's Mike Evans and Sterling Shepard is Chris Godwin right now. No, they're just not as talented. But running backs, they still get all the volume and opportunity, regardless of if they're less talented than the person before them. So it's just so important. And in Ray Davis's case, he's incredibly talented. We saw the 16.7 point game from him with James Cook out, 20 carries and 3 receptions for over 150 yards. I mean, he is awesome. So if he was dropped, pick him back up. No ifs, ands, or buts. And next is Isaac Guerrero. The bye week kind of worked against him, but still, it seems that Jordan Mason is just banged up right now. And Isaac Guerrero, every time he gets the ball, when Jordan Mason goes down, he's been good. Jordan Mason went down in week 6. He ended up with 99 rush yards. And in week 8, Jordan Mason went down. He ended up with 85 rush yards and a touchdown, as well as 3 receptions. He's so explosive. Such a good running back. And I don't know why he's been dropped in a lot of leagues because of the bye week, I assume, but he's now only available in 82% of leagues and should be more, right? He should be rostered in way more leagues. Pick him up if he's still available. And ride him out. I know that Christian McCaffrey was activated to return off the IR, but still look for Isaac Guerrero to still get some points. Blake Corum, and again, this is just mostly going to be running backs. Blake Corum, he's not really getting much opportunity, but contingent upside here. If something happens with Kyren Williams, Blake Corum will be special. So you just need to roster him in case that happens, because if that happens, you'll have to use all your fab to get him. It's just about staying ahead. And same could be said with Trey Benson, except Trey Benson is getting some opportunity here or there, right? He just had 8 carries for 37 yards and scored his first touchdown. He has 2 other games this season with more than 8 carries. Now, you're never really going to rely on him unless James Conner gets hurt. But still, if James Conner gets hurt, Trey Benson will be huge. You've just got to throw him on your bench in case that happens. Now, we made it to a wide receiver, and that's Elijah Moore. Big waiver wire addition last week. And didn't really back it up, right? 3 receptions for 28 yards, but he's still getting the targets over the last 3 weeks. 9 targets, 12 targets, 6 targets. Elijah Moore's not that good, unfortunately. I know that there's a lot of Elijah Moore stands out there. I'm not one of them, but I do think he should be rostered. If someone's getting that type of volume, you've got to roster him. And if it gets to the point where you just need a desperate flex play, then you could throw Elijah Moore in there based on volume alone. It's not exciting stuff. I've been going back and forth on if I wanted to throw him into the meh column, but we're throwing him in the waiver wire ads. He's worth throwing a little bit ad. And you probably don't even have to bid on him too much because he had another disappointing week, but he's getting the volume, and that's what's most important. And Mike Gesicki now is back-to-back weeks with 6 or more targets. This week he had 5 receptions for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Last week he had 7 receptions for 73 yards. These have been both games without T. Higgins, so we know that you can start him up if T. Higgins is out. But even then, I think he's doing enough to earn himself some volume even when T. Higgins returns. This was a player we were huge on this offseason. There were 2 sleeper tight ends I gave you guys. One of them didn't even play at all this season. It was Jelani Woods and Mike Gesicki. So then when Jelani Woods went down, we went heavy on Mike Gesicki. Like, that was the guy I was suggesting taking that at the end of your drafts. Eric Hall did tear his ACL. So Mike Gesicki is even more so solidified as the tight end on this team. And he's just so athletic. We basically compared him to Evan Ingram, right? Where he just has all the athleticism in the world, but just needs to end up on the right team to break out. It's still going to be mostly boom or bust here with him, but those boom weeks are huge. And I wouldn't be surprised if he starts to at least have a decent floor as it pertains to the tight end position, right? Like, if he can just get us 6 points a week, that's all we're looking for. And then sometimes he breaks off for that 20, 30. That's when we get really excited. You've got to roster Mike Gesicki if he's still available. Next is Roschon. Just, he's getting some goal line work, getting some short work with DeAndre Swift active. But if DeAndre Swift does get hurt, Roschon Johnson, especially now with the Khalil Herbert trade, he's going to be a bell cow and then some. So you definitely need to be rostering Roschon Johnson just in case. Drake May, we've talked about him a lot. All season we've been saying make sure you roster him in Superflex if he's available. Now it's still getting to the point where he's not rostered in single QB leagues. He's a every week starter in single QB. He needs to be rostered. He has a very high floor, which is all you can ask for. And he's got a good ceiling as well. Drake May needs to be rostered in single QB leagues, playing too well to not be. More running backs, Kamani Vidal, right? J.K. Dobbins is doing well, but how long can he keep that up? Kamani Vidal has the profile to be a monster. If he ever gets bell cow opportunity, throw him on your bench just in case. Jalen Wright, same thing. If anything happens to Devon Achane, he's going to be huge. If anything happens to Raheem Mostert, he'll start to get some more opportunity as well. Jalen Wright, especially in Dynasty, but in redraft as well, still worth throwing on your bench for some contingent upside. A wide receiver, we've actually got a few non-running backs now. Jordan Whittington. Again, guys, we've talked about him. Keep talking about him. This is the Rams wide receiver I want, unfortunately. He's been hurt the last couple of weeks, and Demarcus Robinson has been absolutely crushing it in his absence, but I think that those would be Jordan Whittington points. Maybe not the deep game-winning touchdown, but still, he should get some opportunity, right? He had 10 targets and 8 targets in the 2 weeks before his injury. Yeah, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are there, but he still should get like 4 or 5 targets. He's just an interesting prospect. Sean McVay clearly liked him before the injury. I think when he returns, he's going to get some volume as well. He's been dropped in a lot of leagues, even some, more deeper leagues. So I would definitely be looking to add Jordan Whittington if he was dropped. Same with Troy Franklin. He kind of broke out and then unbroke out. But still, I maintain that he's a valuable addition and could have a nice second half of the season, especially today, right? If Cortland Sutton ends up being moved, then we could see a huge, huge boost for him. But just remember, just the connection with Bo Nix. I really think that that's going to translate at some point. We saw it for a little bit there, week 6 and 7. Now Cortland Sutton has bounced back and come back to life out of nowhere. So that's been hurting Troy Franklin's performance, but he still had 4 targets this week. I think that should be about what he gets, right? I think he should average these 4 targets a week. And as the season goes on, that still should be good. Next is Jatavian Sanders. As we talked about a few weeks ago, we actually made him a buy. We said if he was not on your waiver wire to try to trade for him, along with Theo Johnson and Ben Sinnott. But now 4 out of the last 5 weeks, Jatavian Sanders has had 5 or more targets. 5 this week, 1 last week, then 6, 7, and 5. To get the 4 receptions for 87 yards with Bryce Young is pretty encouraging. Xavier Legette had the wrist injury, so there may be even more volume going Sanders' way. If you need a tight end, it looks like JT Sanders is a good one. He's actually getting some volume, and the Panthers find themselves in some of these negative game scripts. Theo Johnson, same thing, getting targeted and has the athleticism with the game scripts that the Giants find themselves in to actually be fairly productive at a shallow position. Both Jatavian Sanders and Theo Johnson are rookie tight ends with athleticism on bad offenses that lead to passing volume. So we like these players in some of these more deep tight end leagues that you need some. You might as well look at them. And lastly, in Superflex leagues, I think I am throwing a shot at Desmond Ridder. It really seems the Raiders are done with Gardner Minshew, unfortunately. And Desmond Ridder, he has the rushing floor to at least get some points, in Superflex leagues. So in Superflex, I don't mind adding Desmond Ridder. In single QB, we'll leave him there. But he might actually do pretty well going forward. And that's really it. Kind of a shallow waiver wire week, in my opinion. I'm just keep stashing those running backs. There are a few wide receivers I liked. Now we do have a couple more players, little segments here that we're going to steam through. We'll start with Dynasty Adds. These are some players that I like in Dynasty. I thought that maybe there could be a breakout this year, but it's not happening. It's looking like it'll be next year or later. If any of these players are still available in your Dynasty leagues, then I would look to add them. Adonai Mitchell. As we saw, a really nice catch from him. He has really good athleticism, the second-round draft capital. As the Colts start to figure things out, I do think Adonai Mitchell will become a bigger part of their game plans going forward in Dynasty. I want to add him. I also want to add Andre Yoshivas in Dynasty only. I know that some people are saying you should be adding him in redraft, but I, for one, am concerned about his volume. He does not get a lot of volume. Even in games that he should, he just doesn't. And I just think that that's a product of the type of wide receiver he is. Yeah, he can score some touchdowns. Yeah, he can make some clutch plays, but I don't think he's actually going to end up being a consistent wide receiver. However, in Dynasty, it's worth taking that chance just in case, as I'm not sure if T. Higgins will be on the team next year. Jalen Polk. Unfortunately, Jalen Polk has gone from a guy that looked like he might be able to save your season at the wide receiver position to someone that you should really only be adding in Dynasty. He's a lot more developmental than advertised, and things are just not clicking for him. However, as the Patriots develop, as Drake May gets better, as Jalen Polk gets better, he's definitely worth rostering in Dynasty. Kendre Miller has probably been dropped in a lot of leagues, but since he's on IR, you could probably pick him up and stash him. I mean, it sucks. He keeps getting injured. Seems like he'll always be injured, but still, he's the backup running back in New Orleans behind an old Alvin Kamara, especially with the extension. I don't think the Saints are really going to be able to invest in running back next year. So Kendre Miller, to me, is a fun little dynasty stash. Ben Sinnott, as we talk about Theo Johnson and Jatavian Sanders, Ben Sinnott is one, though, that looks like he's not really going to have much opportunity this year. But next year, he might actually get a chance. We like him a lot. He's our second favorite rookie tight end. Right behind Brock Bowers, ahead of Sanders and Theo Johnson even. We love the athleticism that he displays. He's a really good route runner with good football IQ. So if he's available in your Dynasty League, add him. Audric Estime. Things in just Denver are so messy. I believe Javonte Williams is a candidate to not be on the team next year. And Audric Estime was drafted with the hopes that he could develop into someone that gets more volume. There's some reports out there that they want to give him more work rest of season. I think in Dynasty, he's definitely worth rostering Audric Estime. Roman Wilson. Roman Wilson was a player I loved this year. I thought he was going to have a great rookie season. He is pro-ready. He just couldn't stay healthy. Hopefully, he is able to use this year of being unhealthy to just figure out the NFL game speed, take in the film and everything, and then next year, like really, truly break out. Awesome profile, good college production, great at the Senior Bowl and the Combine. Roman Wilson is someone that needs to be rostered for sure. Luckily, he's on IR, so you can just throw him in your IR spot for now as well. Luke McCaffrey. Luke McCaffrey had third-round draft capital, which was really surprising. Has the McCaffrey blood running through him. Is a developmental prospect, but once he develops, he should be awesome. Now attached to Jaden Daniels for his career as well. Luke McCaffrey is an awesome dynasty stash. Ryan Flournoy, unfortunately, especially with the Jonathan Mingo trade, is not going to happen this year, but maybe next year. This is still a player I believe in. Really great profile. Really great college production. Really great Senior Bowl. Really great Combine. Everything you want. Checks all the boxes except for the draft capital. But still got drafted in a decent place. And lastly, Devontae Walker. This is another player I thought could have some production this year, but they ended up, unfortunately, bringing in Nelson Aguilar again. So the deep threat just went back to him. But Devontae Walker will develop into a deep threat. He was kind of developmental anyway. So it makes sense that he's kind of needed this time this year. But I do believe in him as a prospect. He's very good at separating and getting open. He just kind of had some drop issues. I assume he's been able to work on that this year. So in Dynasty, I don't mind taking a shot on Tez Walker and throwing him on your team. And hey, producer Dustin just put in our show sheet. He says to Calvin Austin, it looks like they may not be getting another wide receiver in Pittsburgh. He keeps developing as this little bit as a deep threat. So, if you've got room for a deep threat in your Dynasty League, he's still young. And this Pittsburgh team is ascending. Producer Dustin, shout out to you for your recommendation. And lastly, as mentioned, I just have some if you want guys. this is some players that a lot of people are saying, hey, you should add this player this week. You know, they just got points. These are players that I basically consider roster cloggers. Like, yeah, sure, you can add them if you want. But for the most part, you should only be adding these players if you know you're going to start them. Really, if you know you're going to start them, or if it's maybe a little bit deeper and you just need like these running back. I'll get into it. But Jalen Tolbert, right? Like Jalen Tolbert, if you need a wide receiver, right? If you really need one, you think that him and Cooper Rush are going to save the world, then sure, you can get Jalen Tolbert. For me, I'm taking the upside swing on some of the players mentioned earlier in the show, and just not really worried about it. But if you need a wide receiver, you can get some Jalen Tolbert, and I guess Jonathan Mingo as well. Next is Juju Smith-Schuster, but in his case, it's just like, now where does the volume come from? You know, it looked like Juju Smith-Schuster was going to be pretty big, but then he got hurt. Then they brought in DeAndre Hopkins, then Travis Kelce started catching some steam. So not sure what type of volume Juju Smith-Schuster is going to come back to, but he will come back and will play. So if you want a Chiefs receiver, Juju Smith-Schuster's out there. Quentin Johnston. A lot of people are rushing to the waiver wire to pick up Quentin Johnston this week. What did we say all season, all offseason? That he would have a better year this year. You know, he has an actually competent head coach. And when you can be utilized correctly, generally you're going to find some production. However, I also said that he's going to end up being a roster clogger. You're not really going to know when these weeks are going to come, and you're never really going to feel confident starting Quentin Johnston, and you just won't. Like, yeah, he's going to have these weeks where he scores a touchdown and you wish you started him. But he's going to have weeks where he doesn't score a touchdown and you're mad you started him. And really, there's not much ceiling. There's still not a ton of pass volume out there. There's still a lot of good wide receivers on the team too, with Ladd McConkey and then DJ Chark returning. Joshua Palmer is totally fine. Like, I'm not too worried about Quentin Johnston, but say you have Justin Herbert. Say you really need a wide receiver. You want to get Quentin Johnston. Sure. If you want, you can do it. Justice Hill. And I like Justice Hill. He's a decent flex play. And that's why he's an if you want. If you need Justice Hill, like you want a running back, you need a flex play, you're in PPR, then sure, go get Justice Hill. But my only concern with him is if something happens to Derrick Henry, he's not going to be a bell cow. Keaton Mitchell will get some work as well. So if you're in a deeper league, Keaton Mitchell is worth adding. Ty Chandler, kind of same thing, right? Like he might have some upside if anything happens to Aaron Jones. But we're actually starting to see Cam Akers get worked in more than Ty Chandler. So it seems that it would be a bit of a committee for either of those players. Cam Akers, Ty Chandler, if you've got the room, if you want, you can add them. But it's probably going to be messy if anything does happen. We talked about with Jalen Tolbert earlier. Brandon Cooks is available in a lot of leagues. He's eligible to return off of IR any day now, if they even want to at this point. You might as well with Brandon Cooks, I guess. But again, it's Cooper Rush and a bad Cowboys team. Like if you want Brandon Cooks, sure. But that's really like you're in a deep league. You're desperate. You need a wide receiver, I guess. Sterling Shepard, same thing, right? Like, yeah, he's getting the volume. But do you really feel great about it? This week, Jalen McMillan was out. Jalen McMillan will be back. Mike Evans is returning soon. Like, Sterling Shepard, if you're in a deeper league and you need the wide receiver, it's full PPR, sure. But for the most part, you should probably just stay on the wire. I mean, like, I roster him in a 14-teamer, but it's just like, you know what I mean? You guys probably, I feel like I'm speaking for the people here. I feel like you know what I mean when I'm going on these guys. Emmanuel Wilson's the next one. Like, yeah, he's been decent. He's getting touchdowns here or there. But Marshawn Lloyd will return at some point, And even if Josh Jacobs goes down, like, are we really sure that Emmanuel Wilson's going to get enough? I mean, we're seeing Josh Jacobs struggle to score touchdowns as the starter. So I don't know, like, what Emmanuel Wilson's true upside is. If anything happens to Josh Jacobs, I feel like then they would activate Marshawn Lloyd and it'd be a duo. Now, it'd still be probably good. But for the most part, it's just like an thing to me. Like, I would rather roster a lot of the other handcuffs that were mentioned earlier. Still worth it. That's why I'm talking about them. But it's more of a if you want, if you've got the room. Specifically, if you have Josh Jacobs, that's probably when it's best to do so. Otherwise, it's just like, I guess. Trey Palmer, same situation with Sterling Shepard. Like, he's getting some volume, but what are we really talking about here? Unless you're in a deep league, like, Jalen Naylor. Like, yeah, he's getting the touchdowns. He's getting some volume, but the same thing here. It's just like, you're never really going to start Jalen Naylor. So, like, just leave him. Like, it doesn't really matter. He could be someone else's problem. And same can be said with Nick Westbrook-Akine. I mean, like, in a deep league, he has some value. You can actually start him. But again, like, if you're not starting Westbrook-Akine, what's the point? What's the point, right? Like, you got to kind of figure that out. Like, I mean, if you have the room, sure, why not? But, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? And actually, I have Superflex stashes. I forgot that I added that this week. So I also have some quarterback stashes for you guys. Nothing like too much. These are essentially either players behind an older quarterback with injury concerns on a team that may just pull the plug, or are on an offense that if something happens to the starter, their system is conducive to quarterback success. Like, yeah, sure, you could totally stash, as we saw, Tyler Huntley, Skylar Thompson, right? But they don't score any fantasy points when they play, and you don't actually like that. These are some ones that I think actually have some upside if things fall their way. Stetson Bennett, we love the Rams system. They have good weapons. Drew Lock, right? He has Malik Neighbors. He slings it when he's out there. Daniel Jones, I could see them go away from at some point this season. So Drew Lock's an interesting one. Sam Howell, I know Geno Smith's playing really well, but as they continue to lose, I could see them just seeing what they have in Sam Howell. He had almost 4,000 passing yards last year and actually had some good games. So I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Howell gets an opportunity at some point this year. So we're looking at him. Michael Penix, right? Kirk Cousins is killing it, but he is still playing through an Achilles and old. Same thing can be said for Tyrod Taylor. Aaron Rodgers may be playing better, but, is old, playing through an Achilles. Trey Lance, he just has athleticism. With Dak Prescott out for a few weeks, Cooper Rush will be the quarterback. But if something happens to Cooper Rush, Trey Lance should be able to go out there and maybe have some decent points on the ground. Probably not, but maybe. We'll bet on the athleticism there. And then Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs. If anything happens to Sam Darnold, we know that Nick Mullins will be able to score points. And if anything happens to Brock Purdy, we know Josh Dobbs will be able to score some points. So those are my super flex stashes. Nothing too crazy there, but it's still worth, just trying to get ahead of it in some of those leagues. Those are some players I would be looking at. And that should do it. I'll go ahead. We had a short show today, and I'm appreciative of you guys tuning into me while there's a show going up against me. So I'll answer your questions. Ty says, what is the trade value of DeAndre Hopkins and Dowdle following their Week 9 performances? I would want at least a second for DeAndre Hopkins. And for Rico Dowdle, I just don't know if you're really going to be able to get much value for him. If you could get a second, I would look for a second for either one of these guys. That's probably where I'm at in terms of a pick. For the most part, though, I would probably try to swap them for some youth, like take a swing, like maybe see if you could trade DeAndre Hopkins for Roman Wilson and a pick. I know that sounds crazy, but if you're looking towards next year, I think Roman Wilson has a good year next year. That's the kind of stuff I would be looking at. And kind of same with Dowdle, like maybe trade him for a Kamani Vidal plus, like take a swing on one of these young upside contingent backup running backs. Let's see. Yeah, the Jonathan Mingo news is a killer for Brian Flournoy. Hey, I also needed a big D-Hop week. I'm starting to catch some steam in the Trade Gods Invitational. I was like in 11th place. I've now found myself in 5th. And I needed a big game from DeAndre Hopkins to keep the train moving, and that sure happened. We love D-Hop here. There were not many shows that were as in on DeAndre Hopkins as I was. I'm a DeAndre Hopkins fanboy, so I know a lot of you have D-Hop. So I'm glad that it's starting to work out. It had been a rough few weeks for sure. Let's see. You're thinking about a trade. Devontae Smith and Austin Eckler for George Pickens and Tyrone Tracy. I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all. I would not trade Devontae Smith for Dobbs or Jennings, though. Devontae Smith gets too much hate. We love Devontae Smith on this show. We are Slim Reaper fans. He's an incredible wide receiver. But that being said, George Pickens is a close enough replacement. And to go from Austin Eckler to Tyrone Tracy, that's a big move. So I don't hate this trade at all. I think that's a fun one. Yeah, you're probably right. I was just very optimistic about Flournoy. I agree. I'm here all the time. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you all have a terrific Tuesday, a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you tomorrow. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll be back tomorrow for some Market Watch. You all have a wonderful week. Have a good one. Peace.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.